guys, welcome back to another video. Hey, here I am again. I'm so happy some of you guys are still here, and thank you so much for the comments that I got congratulating me. That means a lot. Really, that made me very happy to know that there's people out there that care about me. So thank you so much again. Maybe when he's born, I'll bring him on a video. When he's not crying, obviously. I remember having a little brother. When he was born, he would cry a lot. So yeah, I'm prepared for that. But if you guys have any tips, by the way, if any of you guys are parents or anything like that, please leave a comment down below. Because yeah, I'm sure we'll need all the help we can get. But yeah. Anyways, this is a Reddit video, reading ghost stories from Reddit. This is something I used to do quite a lot before, and I decided, why not bring it back? It was really, really popular amongst you guys. You guys seem to enjoy it, so I decided, why not do another one to kind of ease our way back into the bigger conspiracies. So today's video is a bit more lighthearted, I guess you could say, with just reading ghost stories from Reddit. So yeah, before I get into this, you will not be seeing me like this throughout the video. This is just the intro, and the rest will be some sort of video of something. We'll see what it ends up becoming. Probably just like a fireplace or something cozy, right? Reading stories around the fireplace or around the fireplace. But yeah, again, thank you guys so much for being there, and it's been really sad for me not to be uploading, because I see guys are still subscribing and commenting and sending me emails and everything. I just feel so bad, and I'm not uploading just because I feel bad. It's because I really want to, but I feel like I'm letting you guys down a bit, and I definitely don't want to do that because you guys have been so amazingly kind. So yeah, but anyways, let's just get right into this ghost story video from Reddit, and yeah, I really hope that you guys enjoy it because I love reading them. Anyways, let's get right into it. So, the first story. I was a skeptic until I spent a few nights in my wife's childhood home. For as long as I've known my wife, she's mentioned growing up in a haunted house. I always assumed that she was joking because she always brought it up in a quite light-hearted way and never went into much detail. It was a big old house, and I figured she was talking about a weird old house noises. The house belonged to her great aunt, who raised my wife for most of her childhood. Her great aunt recently passed away, and her great aunt's daughter, who my wife calls her aunt, though technically she's her second cousin or something, I'll be referring her as her aunt, now owns the house. After my wife's great aunt passed, we went to stay in the house for 4 nights to attend the funeral and to spend some time with my wife's family, as we live in another state. When we got there, my wife and her aunt were chatting and mentioned that they thought my wife's great aunt might join the ghosts already haunting the house. Still didn't consider that they might be serious. The first night we spent there, I woke up in the middle of the night and noticed someone standing in the corner of the room besides the door. Thinking it was my wife, I asked what she was doing. This woke up my wife, who was actually sleeping beside me. I said, I thought I saw someone in the room with us, but it must just be my eyes playing tricks on me. She said, the person in the corner next to the door. Oh yeah, don't worry about it. I almost pissed myself. I thought there was some creep in the room and my wife was too sleepy to process it. I grabbed my phone to call the police, but when my phone lit up at the room, I saw there was no one there. There wasn't even a weird shape that I might have mistaken for a person. The door was closed, so it wasn't like there could have been someone there who left the room in the moments I was looking away guy's family revealed that everyone who stayed in the house believes it's haunted because they've had at least one completely unexplainable experience there. They all report that the ghosts leave people alone for the most part, though some will live there for a long time. As children, including my wife and her aunt, have described meeting people that they thought were probably ghosts and having positive but strange interactions with them. So that's scary but kind of a cozy little thing. You know, if like, imagine living in a house that you just know is haunted. It's just like, oh, here they go again, the ghosts. I think eventually I would just be so annoyed. I'd be terrified in the beginning, but eventually I'd just be pissed off. It's just like, oh, but that's just me, innit? Right, so on to the next story. Sorry, I gotta breathe sometimes because I'm really, really close to the microphone. Little kids running around in the ICU when death comes. So this person has posted a lot of posts. Like I've been saying in previous posts, being part of the medical community has afforded me the chance to evaluate patterns in all stages of life of people, including patterns that we see at the end of their life. Some of you that work in hospitals or have loved ones that work in hospitals or have been close to loved ones as they took their last breaths and transitioned to the great unknown might have heard of what I'm about to describe. There's a particular phenomena that occurs to people in those last moments, and I'm talking about the appearance of kids running around their deathbed just outside their room or just outside their room. This has to be differentiated to the phenomena of close ones that have passed away visiting in days prior to their deaths. But this is different. This occurs hours, if not minutes, before their deaths. I experience this with greater frequency when I ever work in the ICU unit where people are very sick. What most patients describe is cheerful kids running around their beds in a playful manner, snickering around or just playing around. Most patients usually respond calling the nurse and asking, who are those kids running around and where are their parents? And scaring the living bejesus out of them if they are new nurses. If they are experienced nurses, they know the time of the end is soon to come, and they communicate promptly with us doctors to let us know to be ready. Literature often chalks this phenomena up to lack of oxygen in the brain or neurochemical changes in the process of death and dying. But the pattern is recognizable, and the experience is very similar across all cultural backgrounds and ages. Almost all hospitals have a story about these kids, and if you're entering the field of medicine, nursing, or any other health-allied profession, you will certainly hear these stories. So if you're doing the rounds in the ICU late at night and hear some snickering of tiny feet running in the hallways, prepare for the call of code green or code red is about to sound off in the PA system. So that's terrifying. I've actually read stories similar to this, but usually they're way more sinister. Let's not go into that. Next story. I used to be a hostler for public transport, clean and fueled by city buses at night, while I went to the school during the day. Hustler, is that what it says? It says hostler. I don't know if that's a word, but that's what it says. Anyways, there was a route that I drove around 20 miles on the freeway out of the country where the bus would cruise at 65 miles per hour. Drivers loved it because it got them out of the city driving, so often a senior driver took the route. One evening, in a late spring, making its final run, a car cut the bus off to make an exit from left lane. It clipped the buses in front of the bumper, causing the driver to slam the brakes, which locked up. At a 40-foot bus going that fast, it was amazing the driver kept on the highway and upright. The driver was physically unhurt. A few other riders suffered bad bumps and bruises from being thrown forward in their seats. Unfortunately, there was also a fatality stand when on the freeway she was uncomfortable and preferred to. When the accident happened, she was thrown halfway the length of the bus, landing on her stomach. Sadly, she hemorrhaged and died before the sheriff or the paramedics arrived. Her unborn child wasn't saved. I was brought to the accident about 3 hours later after it occurred, not knowing the details, to bring the bus back home to the garage. The driver was gone and the sheriff had finished his work and told me what happened. I drove alone, followed by my supervisor, in an empty bus with a floor covered in blood and cat litter, which we used to keep the messes from spreading, and it wasn't the first time I'd seen such gore. Getting back to the garage, I cleaned it and sanitized the bus. It took hours. I finished around 1 p.m. and coming back into the shop, the director, the head of fleet, and my shop steward were waiting. I found out officially the story of what had happened, that the driver had a breakdown after learning of her death, and they wanted to keep it quiet. It was a terrible situation for everyone, and they didn't want others to know. I, of course, agreed. I lost my last task was to park the bus in the back lot. No service pending repairs. I dropped the clipboard for the bus 571 at the desk. Over the next few weeks, a few of the details were known by everyone, but not about the victim being pregnant. The driver was so broken by what had happened, he retired. The bus was repaired and back in service, and the car driver who caused the accident had been arrested. That night, I was on the fuel pumps as the fleet came in. One of the last buses to return was the college shuttle, at least the least desirable route, as it was basically the drunk bus for kids going back to campus from the bars. A newer driver was at the wheel when I greeted him, and he was clearly upset and actually jumped out of the bus. At the last stop, to ensure everyone is off the bus, he was supposed to walk in front of, to the front and the back, and then back to his seat to make sure no one was trying to stay on. Most drivers just check their mirrors. He said he walked the bus, saw no one, then locked the doors and went out of service. About 5 minutes later, driving down the street, he looked in the mirror and saw a girl standing in the back of the bus. Still driving, he told her she needed to get off and pulled to the next stop. He pulled over, spun around, and the bus was empty. The driver mentioned that she was worried because the girl looked rough and was white as a sheet. He asked me to check again because he couldn't believe he had imagined it. The bus was empty, and after a few minutes of talking, he walked in and started fueling the bus. It was then I noticed it was 571, the first time I'd seen it since the night of the accident, but didn't think anything of it. Once fueled and washed, I parked it on a different route and went on with my duties. Being 22, I was at the bottom of seniority, which meant my schedule sucked. I always got Sundays off, but my other days, usually Tuesday or Thursday. That following Friday, I came around 5 p.m. My shift was 5 p.m. to 2 a.m., and the senior guys were already there, talking to our supervisor. Seemed the night before someone had snuck into the garage. The guys heard someone, but never found them. They didn't call the cops, which upset our sub, because this was right at the start of the meth epidemic. Druggies would try to steal tools and supplies. The lead senior said they started hearing our girl crying just before the end of the night, but couldn't find her because it seemed like she was moving. When it did stop, he figured that it was a scared kid trying to get away from something. Over the next month, similar incidents happened. I only heard it once, but it was a screaming, not crying, and others just assumed it was a punk kid and turned the music up. The garage parked 35 buses with windows at the top, and most assumed it was someone outside, and the noise carried. But this time, a few other drivers had stories of seeing the sick girl on their bus, but different routes. All were driving the bus 571. One driver came to fuel pumps and asking us to call the paramedic and police because he'd seen a new mom holding a child wrapped up, and the mom looked pale. He thought bus stops but didn't see which one. Police drove to the route but never saw or found anyone. Eventually, a connection was made to the crash and the happenings. Suddenly, the sightings increased and became more fantastic. Drivers started talking about seeing her fly. A mechanic claimed oil came out as blood during a charge, and even a few of the hostlers claimed they saw her poking at the bus. If you listen to everyone described her differently, and it was clear a lot of people just wanted to be a part of it. It became a distraction to the point that the drivers refused the bus when assigned, claiming mechanical issues. Eventually, it was pulled from the rotation and placed on standby. So, if a bus broke down the route, it would be used and was left parked at the main station. The summer passed and people moved on. In August, before the college started again, half of the fleet was updated, and being for bureaucratic spending, all buses were renumbered as the diesel fleet became 400 and the new hybrid vehicles were 300, supposedly because the director wanted them to rhyme with electricity. Almost immediately, people started hearing crying at night, and drivers started seeing things on the bus 442. We hostlers could tell 442 was bus 571, but the service clipboard and the front end was newly painted. After another week and people connecting the dots, 442 was put on reserve. Eventually, it ended up being sold to the police as their drunk bus break up to parties. About a year later, right when I was quitting to go back for my master's, the cops came by to fuel up before the first weekend when students arrived. The cop driving, standing at the pumps, got talking, and he mentioned how he hates this fucking bus. Gives me the creeps. I didn't ask why, and he didn't share. Yeah, so that was that story with my flawless reading, obviously. So, on to the next one. Hopefully, guys are still here. This is gonna be a fairly long video, but that's the least I can do for you guys. Next one. Something followed me from a psychiatric hospital. So, I got a lot of shit for this story in another subreddit. Thus, I removed it. But this is a personal experience, and what you read into it, yeah, that's up to you. This is a long story. So, I've been back and forth on whether or not to tell this story, mostly because it involves some suspect aspects of my working life that I'm not at liberty to discuss, but also because it had severe personal implications for me. Anyways, I have decided to share it on here, and I hope you understand why there are things I simply cannot go into detail about. This all started in December of 2020. As a part of my education, I was scheduled for a 6-month internship at a psychiatric hospital. I had previous experience with working with these type of patients, so I was really excited about it. I switched around 4 different wards of the hospital, so I treated a lot of different people with lots of different problems. I was curious about all the different aspects, so I never said no to a task, which meant I came across pretty much everything from murderers to, I'm not going to say the word, but the word that starts with a P, to suicidal teenagers with personality disorders. So I'm not going to say that other word. It's people who, I'm not even going to fucking say it. Yeah. In my work life, I had people spit on me, verbally and physically assault me, throw shit psychology check of all patients and always when they're admitted. One day my alarm went off. They're all connected, so I know where I need to run to help my colleagues. I immediately knew it had to be Anne, and I was right. She had only had her legs and torso fixated. Again, normal procedure. If the patient otherwise is relatively calm, she had defecated in her hand and thrown it at the guard watching her. She then proceeded to bite her fingers so hard that 3 or 4, and I can't remember the exact number, had literally bad fractures. Both of her hands were a bloody mess, and she needed like 50 stitches afterwards. I'm just gonna read it exactly like it's written. I wasn't the blood or the fact that she would throw up and throw her filth at us. I'd seen that loads of times, but the screams this woman made, it was almost the most primal, guttural, and terrifying sounds I have ever heard. It scared me. The best way I can describe it is something like a bear growling and a mountain lion hissing and spitting at the same time. I have seen a fair share of people in primal distress, but I could have never imagined that a person could make sounds like that. As an intern, I am in no way allowed to use force, so I was just watching as 7 of my colleagues tried to fixate her fully to her bed. They had serious trouble pinning her down, reminding me these are really experienced people. At last, we called a medical alarm, which immediately calls for a chief psychiatrist to make decisions. He decided to forcefully meditate her. They gave her one and then another shot. It only seemed to piss her off, even though it should have put her to sleep. At the 3rd injection, she calmed enough down so they could restrain her. She never nodded off though. She just breathed heavily and kept staring up at some corner in the room, sometimes smirking at something only she could see. Fast forward 2 weeks. I was back at the ward, and it was a relatively calm weekend. So there wasn't really much to do. Anne was in one of her good periods, and she had her restraints move. A guard was always by her door, though. I was sitting in the office when suddenly I see Anne walking in the hallway without her guard. I didn't know if he had taken a bathroom break or whatever, but he wasn't around, so I caught up with her. I asked her what she was doing in the hallway alone, but of course she didn't respond. I should mention that many of my colleagues were afraid of Anne, and rightfully so, even though everyone is aware that the illness and it's not the person attacking you, but when it keeps happening that a patient does catch some stigma. I, for one, always try to look at the person and not the illness, so I asked where she was going. She took me by the arm and led me to a common area. She went over to a book cabinet, turned and looked at me and muttered, "Read, book." I was completely taken back by the fact that she was speaking. She pulled out a random book and handed it to me. She then sat down on the floor and started rocking back and forth. I joined her on the floor and started reading the book. It was just some random old book, probably from a charity, and it had no special meaning. But as I read, she came closer and closer to me. She then cuddled up to me, put her head in my lap, and fell asleep. One of my colleagues came by me and looked absolutely shocked, and before I knew it, 5 or 6 people, including the chief psychiatrist, was looking at me reading this random book out to her. I got a lot of praise for this, which is always nice, but then things took a turn for the worst, for me at least. It started one night when I was home, alone. It was a completely normal night for me, until I heard something from upstairs coming down the stairs. The best way to describe it is like a big dog thrashing and tumbling down the stairs. You know, like when a dog rushes down the stairs to greet you. But this was bigger, much bigger. I could hear the weight of something tumbling down, while nails of claws or whatever slid down the steps. I got up, thinking that somehow there was a massive animal in my house, but there was nothing there. That scared the ever-living shit out of me. I had never had anything like that happen to me. I left the house and stayed the night at my parents', but it also had strange effects on my body, like I had a filter over my eyes or something. Everything started to seem out of focus, like tunnel vision, but with a massive blur added to it. And then I started to dissociate. I had this feeling of being totally out of control with my body. Then came the panic attacks. My girlfriend called an ambulance one of the times because I was on the verge of a heart attack. The paramedics said I had a heart rate of 240 beats per minute. I've had no prior problems with my psyche, but I figured it was stress. I've suffered from sleep paralysis before, but never with hallucinations or whatever you want to call it. But that started recently. I see a large black mass with long arms and legs sit at the top of the corner of our bedroom like a massive spider, but just with 4 legs. This is now happening on a nightly basis. A couple of days ago, I told my girlfriend about it because she kept pestering me with questions about my nightmares. She said, "That's funny. Every time you're just about to go to sleep, you look up in that corner and you sort of smirk." That reminded me of Anne. And now that I'm absolutely terrified that I might have brought something home. Believe me or not, that's up to you. I've never treated a patient like Anne, and none of my colleagues had either. It was scary stuff, and I've never suffered any psychological problems before. Never. But something is going on, I'm sure of it. It feels like it wants me to go back to something, I don't know. And by the way, Anne is much better today. She is in a rehab